So before we get started today, I want you guys to take a very good look at these old Mega Man boxes. Look at how much is going on here. Look at how cluttered it is. Look at all of this storytelling. X in his armor. We got Zero doing Zero things. Is that Gravity Beetle up there? And then take a look at X4. There is nothing going on here. We have X without his armor and Zero just holding him back. Look at X. He's like, hold me back, Zero, hold me back! Off to a good start. I don't even have the cover. The Mega Man X series has been far from perfect up until this point. It set itself a very high standard with the first entry in the series, and in my opinion, the two games that followed it had a very substantial drop in quality. Now that doesn't mean they didn't try. X2 and X3 both experimented with new concepts that, although they fell flat, you can't deny that they were trying something new and creative. With that said though, I want to ask one very simple question. Does X4 redeem the X series after these two little missteps? Spoiler alert, yes it does. It does tenfold. Mega Man X4 is released in 1997 for the Sony PlayStation and the Sega Saturn, 2 years after Mega Man X3, which really says a lot considering Mega Man X2 and X3 were both released just over or under a year from the game before it. The development time definitely shows in Mega Man X4's presentation. Right away, the art direction in this game looks absolutely superb. Not just the FMV intro that greets us upon booting the game, but the music and the sound design are near perfect, and the music can vary from these calm yet tense ambience, rocking moments that give you a sense of hope and justice, to just downright heavy metal that it gives you a sense of dread. And I fucking love it. I'll go into more detail about it down the line, but man, look at this game, it's fucking gorgeous. This game isn't fucking around. Now before we get started with the story, we have one major change to the formula that I'd like to address, and that is a fully playable Zero. Yes, I know he is playable briefly in Mega Man X3, but you can't deny that he's gotten a significant downgrade since that game. However, if you ask me, it's definitely for the better. Zero is simply the other side of X's coin. Where X focuses on jumping, shooting, and suppressing enemies from a safe distance, Zero is much more strategic. He doesn't have many ranged attacks, he's nearly completely restricted to his saber, meaning that you've got to get very up close and personal, with some very different mechanics that I'll touch on once I dwell on Zero's campaign. And yes, you heard me correctly, Zero's campaign. On top of Mega Man X4 being the first game to let you play as Zero all the way through, X4 offers us two completely different stories for both X and Zero, though keep in mind that you're committed to whichever hunter you pick from the get-go. You can't switch between these two like in X3. In X's campaign, we're greeted by another cutscene that's surprisingly dark, not in tone, though, well, that too, but also visually. We're thrusted into the middle of a conversation between a large yellow Reploid and someone who I'm not even going to bother covering up. That's Sigma. That's gotta be Sigma. It literally cannot be anyone else. This other Reploid is a bot named General, and as his name implies, he's, well, the General. The General for a new faction introduced in X4, the Repla Force, a peacekeeping force designed by Dr. Kane after prominent Reploids like Sigma and Dr. Doppler later went Maverick. Sigma tries to convince the General that the humans will turn on them eventually, and that they should act now to destroy the humans before they betray the Reploids. General tells Sigma to get the fuck out of his house before Sigma threatens that General will eventually change his mind, maniacally laughing as he leaves General to sit there and reflect on his choice. Preserve the humans, or preserve the Reploids. Back at Hunter Base, X gets word that the Repla Force is attacking the Sky Lagoon, a peaceful colony home to hundreds of humans and Reploids alike, and X is sent to investigate. After fighting his way through Dragonfly drones and little Bubble Boys, hey there, Bubble Boy! A large dragon mechanoid starts destroying the bridge before making its way over to the core of Sky Lagoon. Dragoon tells us that the Mavericks have destroyed the Sky Lagoon's core and that X should get out of there. X is able to escape before the Sky Lagoon falls to the earth. Cities, people, everything, all gone. People died, and this is a surprisingly dark moment for the game to start off with, though X's dialogue doesn't exactly reflect this moment very well. After some platforming with shifting environments, something we haven't quite seen to this scale in the series yet, X encounters the same dragon mechanoid from earlier in the game. This is Eragon. Eragon? E-region? E-region. Regardless of how you pronounce his name, he's piss easy, though not the easiest intro boss we've seen so far. Not counting X1s because that's less of a boss fight and more of an example of how weak X is, this is the best intro boss we've seen to date with the X franchise. Once E region is defeated, we're greeted by another Reploid from the Repliforce. Going along with the army theme of the Repliforce, this is Colonel. Colonel tells X that he's only here to save his sister, while X asks him to lay down his arms and come back with him to Hunter Base HQ. Colonel, either out of pride or loyalty to the Repliforce's independence, refuses, despite X telling him that if he refuses, the Hunters will have no choice but to classify the Repliforce as Mavericks. Because as the saying goes,
either you are with us, or you are with the Mavericks.
Though I don't think that it's that simple. X clearly doesn't want to label the Repliforce as Mavericks. It is worth noting that the Repliforce wasn't actually responsible for the fall of Sky Lagoon. That was solely by Maverick activity. But at this point, the game does a great job at leaving this up to interpretation. The Repliforce, a peacekeeping faction within the Reploids, are now wrongfully accused of being Mavericks themselves. Something that the General doesn't really take too kindly. The Repliforce feels like they have no choice but to declare their independence, with General sending a transmission out to the public, insisting that this is not a rebellion against the humans, and simply a plan to secure the safety of innocent Reploids by building a peaceful sanctuary for themselves.
Remember, this is neither about insurrection nor rebellion against our human creators.
The transmission ends by panning to a shot of Sigma watching the General's message, pleased that the General has fallen right into his hands. Sigma eagerly awaits to see what X and Zero will do, now that he's stirred up a bit of a civil war in the Reploids. Back at Hunter HQ, X is greeted by another new Reploid. This is Double, an innocent little ball of a robot that was sent to inform X that the Colonel has started his coup against the city. X has a hard time believing it to be true, but Double insists. It's here where we're briefed on the 8 Mavericks the game throws at us, although with a bit of a twist. We're not simply hunting down Mavericks in this game. Story-wise, we're actually halting the military advancements by the Repliforce before one of the heads of the Repliforce comes to intervene. Gameplay, yeah, it's still Mega Man. At its core, it's still play the level all the way through and beat the boss at the end, but there's a lot of substance going on behind the scenes that gives us a genuine reason to face off against these Reploids instead of just hunting them down because they're Maverick. Granted, there are still a couple of genuine Mavericks in this game that we're sent to track down, but when it comes down to it, X is tasked with the following: destroy a prototype weapon being developed in the forest, stop a virus that was let loose on the web, rendezvous and destroy a fleet of Repliforce ships, capture Dragoon from the beginning of the game and bring him back for questioning, investigate why an abandoned laboratory has suddenly become operational again, cut off the Repliforce's weapons convoy, shut down a Repliforce facility in the Arctic, and investigate the destruction of a city's power plant. It's at this point where the game starts to feel like a very traditional Mega Man game. We don't really get much more story until all 8 bosses are defeated. It's as simple as finding the boss order of your choosing, taking out the Mavericks, collecting some power-ups along the way, and then making your way to this game's version of the fortress. Along the way, like every other Mega Man game, you'll be collecting this game's collectibles and boss weapons, both of which have gone back to their simpler roots. I admit that the special weapons this time around feel very gimmicky and really only serve to protect yourself from a certain stage hazard and not really that practical in normal use, something that I gave the weapons in X2 a lot of shit for. But even though this might sound hypocritical, I'm going to give X4 a pass because of the charm these weapons have and how much fun they are to use. However, a lot of that praise for the special weapons is solely because of the new helmet upgrade. The helmet upgrade in X4 is fucking broken. It grants X unlimited ammo for all of his special weapons unless they're charged, meaning that there's no worry of depleting special ammo during a level that you might be saving for a boss, there's no fear of running out of special ammo during a boss, and it completely takes away all of the risks of using a special weapon that Mega Man's had since 1987, making X4 one of the easiest games in this series in my opinion. It's so easy that they reduced the number of sub-tanks that you get down to 2, opting to replace the 3rd sub-tank with a weapons tank that restores all of your weapon ammo, and an EX tank, which is the most useless item I've ever seen in Mega Man X. Simple concept, right? You get a game over and you get to start with 4 extra lives instead of 2. However, getting a game over sends you back to the beginning half of the level, since levels are now split into 2 segments. Getting a game over just sends you back to the beginning of that segment. Maybe not including Split Mushroom stage and the boss rush, this isn't really too much of a hurdle. The leg piece of the armor grants X the ability to air dash and to hover, which again offers some really nice mobility options, especially during boss fights. The chest piece shows the return of the Giga attack from X2, though instead of a screen nuke, it's more of a dash that does additional damage. I never really bothered to use this, however the arm parts is where things get really interesting. X4 offers 2 new arm upgrades instead of 1, and you're offered to take whichever one you want and even come back to switch them out down the line if you'd like. The first one is a multi-shot buster of sorts, which lets you store up to 4 charge shots that you can fire at any time. This is a really cool idea, however my personal favorite has to be the Plasma Buster. The Plasma Buster fires a giant charge shot that's about the same height as X himself. It leaves 3 little plasma balls behind on contact, which continue to do damage, which wrecks the fuck out of mini-bosses. The special weapons, though, aren't too spectacular, but I will say that they are definitely creative. My favorite being the Soul Body, which makes a copy of X come out a few feet in front of him, serving as a bit of a riot shield sort of thing, and its charge-up variation, which gives you a second X to control on screen, is a really cool concept. However, because of Mega Man X's linear structure and reliance on players playing how they wish, mechanics like this never really get a chance to shine, one of the negative side effects of the Mega Man formula. The lightning web only really exists for you to get collectibles, however because of its reliance on skill, because the web disappears right after you jump on it, I'd say that it's much higher up there, especially when compared to that crystal weapon in X2 that just existed to make platforms. Frost Tower is kind of garbage, and I haven't been able to find a single practical use for it outside of using it against the Jet Stingray fight. Aiming Laser, though I love the charm of it, only really exists to be Storm Owl's weakness. The rest of them are just different variations of moving projectiles. After you defeat half of the Mavericks the game has to offer, X and Double receive a transmission from Colonel telling X to meet him at the Memorial Hall. X doesn't hesitate in the slightest to meet him, despite Double telling him that it's most likely a trap. Colonel catches X and challenges him to a fight before escaping, telling X that he hasn't changed his mind yet and fucks off. Story-wise, this fight is kind of pointless, however, gameplay-wise, this fight is more to give you a tease of what's to come in the final act. Before we jump to the end, I think that it's good that I bring up the levels of X4, because god damn they're so good. From the jungle of Web Spider stage burning through logs and avoiding electric spiderwebs, to the Skyfleet level where you're jumping around and on these flying tanks using a new ride armor to jump and fly over enemies. The Eagle ride armor is my personal favorite. This thing kicks so much ass. It can fly indefinitely and fire homing charging shots. And god damn, do you hear this music? Nearly every theme in the game is fucking fantastic. The shift to CD quality music was everything that makes levels like Slash Beast Stage always feel like a fun time. Jet Stingray stage though can fuck right off. Okay, it's not as bad as everyone says it is, but it really takes Mega Man's trial and error gameplay formula and cranks it up to 11. I can't imagine anyone completing this stage on their first go. And that's okay, Mega Man games typically aren't friendly on their first playthroughs, but the unpredictability of it and the requirement for such a high reaction time makes this stage one that I never really look forward to going back to. But the music is so fucking good! Jet Stingray even comes out to fuck with you before the boss fight. Dragoon stage is fucking rad too, especially if the player is skilled enough. They could just rush straight through all these hazards if they time it right. And also, if you know what you're doing, you're able to take the ride armor into the stage into the boss fight itself, leading to a really fun power trip, especially since he reveals that he was the one that fell Sky Lagoon. And the Street Fighter moves he's pulling off are a nice touch too! Speaking of the Hadouken, since I had no idea where else to put this into the review. Unlike the previous 3 entries in the Mega Man X series, X4 actually has no completion bonuses like the Hadouken, Shoryuken, or the Golden Armor, as well as no endgame bonuses like the Z-Saber in X3. However, that doesn't mean that there's no ultimate weapon used to make the game easier. Well, it's not so much an ultimate weapon, but more an ultimate armor. Only accessible by inputting a certain button command while selecting X on the character select screen and then holding L1 and R2 until the game starts, X will start with all of the cyan on his armor replaced with purple highlights. Nothing too special on its own, however, once you find one of the 4 armor capsules hidden in the upper 4 levels of the stage select, Dr. Light instead gives you an entirely new armor. Well, cosmetically. This is the Ultimate Armor, an armor set that has all 4 of the armor's abilities available from the get-go, and uses the Plasma Buster instead of the Multi-Shot Buster. But one major difference is its Nova Strike. The Nova Strike used by the Ultimate Armor is much larger compared to the one used by the normal armor. And you have infinite uses of the damn thing. This shit does almost as much damage as the average boss's weakness, so if you're looking for a bit of a handicap to help you get through Mega Man X4, why not give the Ultimate Armor a try?
You'll never catch me.
Mavericks.
Not when I shift into maximum.
Nova Strike.
Though Zero does also have an unlockable armor through the same method, however it's completely cosmetic and doesn't change anything that Zero's gameplay has to offer. No added defense, no special perks, just a black paint job on his red armor. However, the trail left behind him when he dashes is still red, something that honestly bothers me way more than it should. However, it does look really good when complemented by the purple Z-Saber that Zero gets once defeating Storm Owl. The rest of the bosses, though, it's a lot harder to find things to talk about. Web Spider puts your mobility to the test, Frost Walrus is annoying. Yeah, okay, I admit, these bosses aren't too spectacular to fight. But like the special weapons, what they lack in gameplay, they make up for in charm. Cyber Peacock has this radical cyber design with some grainy sound effects and turns static when hit with his weakness. Storm Owl sets the tone for him right as soon as his tiny foot steps onto the ground and the whole screen shakes. Split Mushroom screams a lot. All of these bosses are just so much to fight, not because of the fight itself, but because of the charm and personality that they bring with them. Once all 8 Mavericks are defeated, X gets word that the Repliforce is nearing the final stage of their plan and are soon going to depart the spaceport, with X making chase and confronting Colonel. Colonel says that he's off to claim their independence from the humans, implying that the Repliforce is going to create their own version of Genosha, except instead of mutants, it's Reploids. Once Colonel's defeated and X returns to Hunter HQ, Double suspiciously disappears, and X decides to take the fight to General himself upon his super secret base that is totally not a giant weapon, the final weapon. But just before making it to the final weapon...
Oh, not again. Hey, watch it!
It's here where we, the player, get a bit of backstory for Double. He's working with these Clown Man impersonators just before getting a call from, you guessed it, Sigma.
It's me. Those hunters must not be allowed in here. Terminate them!
Roger.
Guess we finally found out what the Double stands for in his name. Yeah, as a kid I was really too stupid to understand that Double stood for Double Agent, but... Oh, Jesus! Double violently murders all of the Reploids in the area. Okay, I know that that's supposed to be oil, but at first glance you can't tell me that's not blood. This scared the hell out of me as a kid. I'm not sure something like this could come out today with anything lower than a T rating. Granted, I was that kind of kid that wasn't even allowed to play Portal because it was too realistic. News report today says that Portal inspired kids to build a portal to hell? More at 6, Genosha. Genosha. Once at the final weapon, X almost immediately catches Double, standing there, ominously.
He's just standing there, menacingly.
Waiting, planning, and...
You're gonna get hurt, X!
Man, this voice acting is painful. Alright, that's something I haven't quite brought up yet, but for the first time in the series, we're blessed with a fully voiced cast, and the same team that provided the voice acting and animations as Mega Man 8, which were in development at the same time.
That must be it over there! Wait, Zero! I'm serious!
X and classic Mega Man both share the same voice actor. I think voice actress, actually. In a decision that I honestly can't get behind, X is supposed to be an older, more mature take on Mega Man, so giving him this very childlike voice just feels...
Zero, if I become a Maverick, you have to take care of me.
Wrong. The same kinda goes for all the bosses. All of the bosses have their own voice acting, albeit in their boss fights as grunts and... But none of them really feel that bad. Dragoons are actually pretty fucking great as his voice is actually kind of intimidating. But the same cannot be said for Double. His voice lines piss me off almost as much as X's. Once the Double Agent is dealt with, Double informs X that he was sent by Sigma from the very beginning, implying that his duty was all part of Sigma's plan to manipulate the civil war between the Hunters and Reploids from behind the scenes. This is cool and all, but man, I just don't feel anything. We're not really given a reason to feel bad about Double's betrayal, nor for X, who didn't really seem like he relied on Double that much. But I think that this was done for a reason that I'll be covering once I discuss Zero's campaign. The stage that continues after the death of Double is a pretty neat level that in Mega Man tradition borrows stage hazards and elements from previous levels in a way that feels creative, though the camera can be pretty misleading at points. It's at this point where X finally confronts the General, and jeez, he's massive! Weren't him and Sigma the same size in the intro cutscene? God damn, this looks like we're in for a giant Sigma at the end of the game. The fight against General is pretty unique. You can only do damage to his head, and the larger arena often makes it a bit tricky to get a good shot in, assuming that you're using his weakness and collected the helmet piece. Once he's been defeated, it's revealed that the weapon is starting to malfunction. I'm just more wondering why the fuck they have a giant space cannon in the first place if this whole revolt wasn't meant to be a hostile act against the humans. Was this weapon supposed to be a deterrent? Man, I didn't think I was gonna be reviewing Metal Gear Solid until next year. Oh hell yeah, here we go, everyone's favorite staple of the Mega Man series. The boss rush! Though I normally don't really give a shit about the boss rush, I gotta give this one props. The music that plays, that almost alien design of the portals, the Horsehead Nebula in the background of every fight that's just watching over you, and even the green water in Jet Stingray's rematch, it all sets the tone really well for the finale of what's been, so far, a pretty grand adventure. At the very end, we're finally greeted by Sigma, who not only isn't the same size as General, but also is confronting us outside of the boss door. It's here where we get confirmation that Sigma was pulling the strings behind the scenes all along, and that it was his goal to turn the Hunters and the Repliforce against each other, also that he can hijack the Repliforce's final weapon and destroy the Earth. Though the whole stealing the ultimate weapon at the last second plot point does bother me, because it feels like they're just trying to raise the stakes because the plot demands it. I'm not sure how they could have worked in the traditions like a normal boss rush and multiple Sigma fights into a story this heavy and still make it work. After a bit of teasing, Sigma is finally confronted. His first form, well, is again piss easy, but his second form is where things get interesting. On top of the really neat armor design, this boss fight is actually pretty fun, although a little bit easy to manipulate once you know what you're doing. Just make sure that his scythe hits the wall, you'll have an easy time. His final form is when things start to get intense. Not only is it technically two fights at the same time, but these two different Sigmas both take a fuckload of hits. The gunner one looks like a fucking transformer, while the head on the left looks like it's giving me a lot of fucking problems. See, Capcom X Challenge did it first, and god damn it, listen to this shit! This music is so fucking good. X finally defeats Sigma before Sigma tells him that the weapon is already pointed towards Earth and there's nothing that we can do about it. Until General shows up at the last second, sacrificing himself to destroy the final weapon. Have you ever heard of a Deus Ex Machina? This is a textbook example.
I spill my drink.
I spill my drink.
Show me your true power.
With X making it out just in time in his goofy little space jet, X does some reflecting on his journey before Zero calls X to check in and see if everything's okay. X worries that he might become a Maverick someday and asks Zero that if he ever goes Maverick, if Zero can be the one to take him out. And that's actually really sad when you think about it. Zero tells him that he's got nothing to worry about, and X returns back to Earth, ending X's story. X4 took a very creative and fresh take on the Mega Man X formula. Portraying the Repliforce as individuals making their own decision instead of Reploids that just went haywire was a really cool idea, and the Repliforce are just individuals trying to do the right thing, framed as the bad guys and having no choice but to fight back. A change that I personally really love. While at its core, X4 returns to the formula that made the first X game so great, however, X's campaign left some folks itching for something new. An itch that Zero's campaign was here to scratch. Zero's campaign is the topic that almost always comes up when talking about Mega Man X4, and I think that it was intended to be this way. Zero's campaign was definitely one of the selling points for Mega Man X4. As soon as you hit the start button on Zero's icon, it's clear as day why they wanted you to play as Zero so badly. As soon as we start the game, we get confirmation to a long-time plot point that the X series has been building up to over the past 3 games, and that's that Zero's creator turns out to be none other than Dr. Wily. Shown to us in a nightmare sequence, this seems to be a recurring dream for Zero, complete with some pretty violent imagery. Man, I really can't believe Capcom got away with this. Like, I know it's just oil, these Reploids aren't human, but goddamn, how did they not get anything that was higher than a KA rating? They even changed the red-looking oil into black in the commercials, so why not change it there? It's here where the similarities to X's campaign start to show, so for fear of redundancy's sake, I'm going to try to only bring up the parallels between X's and Zero's stories if they offer some new substance that wasn't present in X's story. Zero is sent to investigate the fall of Sky Lagoon, and right away, you, the player, are shown how differently Zero handles compared to X, and even in comparison to how he played in X3. He no longer sports his Zero Buster, and instead opts for a 3-slash combo with his saber and a short mid-air slash in the air. There's no denying that Zero's saber is a lot more effective against enemies in comparison to X, however, because of this limited range, he offers a very risk versus reward style of gameplay, one that really resonates with some fans. Just before reaching the end of the stage, we're introduced to Iris, someone who the game implies Zero knows already, something that a lot of new characters in this game do actually. She tells us that E region is a Repliforce mechanoid that went Maverick, with Zero quickly dispatching the rogue mechanoid. Zero tells the Colonel that his sister is okay and treats Zero with an odd sign of respect despite being told that he's going to be labeled as a Maverick. I know that Zero was formerly leader of the Maverick Hunters before dying in X1. Is Zero the leader again? I don't think it's ever told. It's more likely that he's just a legend amongst Reploids. We don't know, but I think that gray area of interpretation for the player kind of helps the storytelling a bit. Back at HQ, we're greeted by Iris, who begs Zero not to fight her brother. However, she still offers to help for the greater good, and is tasked with the same objectives as X for why we're hunting down these 8 Mavericks. It's here where we come to the first major difference in Zero's campaign to X's, and that's the lack of armor upgrades. Zero still collects sub-tanks and heart tanks, however the armor capsules are unique to X, and because of that, physical perks such as air dashing are rewarded through techniques from bosses. That's right, instead of gaining bosses' special weapons like X, Zero learns techniques, which I think canonically is some adaptive shit programmed into him from Wily to make him a tougher killing machine that could rival the classic Mega Man. Not only are his attacks hard as hell for someone like me to pronounce, but he actually gets moves very akin to special moves like in Street Fighter. All but one of his moves have unlimited uses, but can only be used via certain button inputs. You don't get anything quite like down forward attack like the Hadouken, but with the Ryujin for example, you need to hold up and press the attack button to use it. I admit, I really did not like this as a kid and why I preferred playing as X for a long time, but now I think that this is one of the things that defines Zero as a playable character. It makes him feel a lot more strategy based, and once you build up the muscle memory for all these different moves, it feels really damn satisfying to pull off any move that you want, just from certain button inputs, a luxury that X doesn't share. After half of the Mavericks in the game are defeated, Colonel challenges Zero to meet him at the Memorial Hall. Sound familiar? Only this time we're greeted by a cutscene instead of a boss fight. Ignoring the awful voice acting and Zero's inability to say coup correctly.
It's not too late. Stop the coup now! Never.
Zero and Colonel have a short sparring match before it's broken up by Iris, who reminds Colonel that Zero was the one who saved her from E-Region. Colonel backs off for now, with Iris then begging Zero to stop fighting out of fear that one of them may end up losing their life. However, Iris continues to aid Zero in his mission up until Zero lands the killing blow on Colonel at the space harbor. When Zero makes it to the final weapon, he's greeted by Iris holding a mysterious purple orb of mystical energy. She tells him that although she loved him, she was devoted to her brother, and just saying that gives me goosebumps. Fueled with revenge, she uses the purple orb to summon what looks like a modified eagle ride armor, and not only a pretty intense boss fight, but a pretty damn fun one too. You can only damage the purple crystal, meaning that Iris herself is pretty much invincible. Once she's defeated, a certain cutscene plays that you might have heard of before, even if you haven't played Mega Man X4.
Ah! No, this isn't happening! There's no reason for me to go on. What? What am I fighting for?
Iris, the Reploid Zero loved, died by his own hands. There's a lot to unpack here, like, why do robots have love interests? But I gotta admit, if you're able to look past the terrible voice acting, there's a tough cutscene here. Even if you haven't played X4, you might be familiar with this cutscene, the infamous "What am I fighting for?" scene. Sure, Iris's death doesn't really hit too hard because of the little development we got with her, but there's a little bit of something here. I've heard that Iris gets more development in Xtreme 2 for the Game Boy Color, but I haven't played that game yet, but maybe I'll look at it in a future video. The only thing that irks me about this tragic moment for Zero is that right away after you play as him, he still goes. I would have personally made it so that Zero doesn't make these noises after this moment in the game. Even though the cutscene is admittedly pretty funny, having Zero completely silent after Iris's death would have been a great way to reflect what the player and Zero have both gone through up until this point in the game. Zero confronts the general in a fight, and due to Zero's limited range, this fight is a bit more difficult when compared to X's. After the general's defeat, Zero puts together that the weapon isn't working correctly and guns it straight for Sigma. After giving the Mavericks one last good saber canceling, Sigma confronts Zero, claiming that it was his plan all along to have Zero destroy the Colonel and Iris. He then attempts to remind Zero of who he used to be in what my opinion is the biggest twist in the franchise. Cut to a flashback of a time before the events of Mega Man X1. Sigma's still rocking his Buzz Lightyear cosplay and is responding to reports of a red Maverick. It's worth noting that Sigma is also missing his eye scars, so it's as obvious as ever that this is before Sigma went Maverick, though not too long before he did. This cutscene is fucking rad. The first time we see this, we're all kind of rooting for Zero to win, but at the same time, everything feels off. Zero just completely brutalizes Sigma. Zero literally punches his arm right off, or pulls it off, but I want to believe that he just punches it off. The stakes get higher. We see a silhouette of Zero kicking the shit out of Sigma before a very familiar W takes up the crystal on Zero's forehead, stunning him just long enough for Sigma to shatter the crystal on his head. As the battle-worn Sigma's walking out, we hear him call Zero a maverick, implying what little 6-year-old me didn't quite understand at the time, that not only was Zero originally a maverick, but he was actually the first maverick. Man, to think that everything in the X series, the rogue mechanaloids, the civilians and Reploids killed in the Space Lagoon incident, and what I speculate would also be the death of the classic cast like Mega Man, Proto Man, and Base, were all caused by the past maverick leader himself, Zero. After Zero lays the finishing blow, General again sacrifices himself, telling Zero that Sigma blinded him from the truth, before once again using himself to destroy the final weapon. Successfully escaping the final weapon, Zero reflects on not only what happened during the course of X4, but also the memories that have plagued his dreams, mourning the death of Iris before returning back to Earth, ending Zero's campaign. Now, you might have noticed that I didn't really crack as many jokes when it came to Zero's campaign, and I gotta admit, as awkward as it is to say, this campaign kinda gets to me. Once you're able to look past the terrible voice acting and delivery, there's a tragic character-driven story underneath that I really can't explain why, but god damn, it really gets to me. And I think what I have to thank for this is this.
No! This isn't happening! There's no reason for me to go on! What am I fighting for?
First appearing as Zero's voice actor in 2004's Mega Man X8, Lucas Gilbertson is hands down the best voice actor to have ever graced the character. The dude apparently loves the role too, and I don't know, I can't explain it, but god damn it, this shit gives me goosebumps every time I listen to it. Though I gotta ask, in the original dub, do Zero's lines at the end remind anyone else of Dexter from Dexter's Laboratory? Overall though, if I had to pick a favorite campaign, I'd have to say that Zero's has gotta be my favorite of the two. Not just because of less collectibles and the less cookie-cutter boss order, but also the seamless combat that Zero's provided with, including dash canceling, a move that bypasses some bosses' iframes or invincibility frames by mashing the attack button and the dash button. Things like this that someone who likes to speedrun games like myself, although I'm not very good at it, personally love. But as well as the character-driven story that Zero's campaign offers, is really the cherry on top of Zero's campaign. Mega Man X4 all around is a great game, and while I do wish that X and Zero were able to switch with each other between stages, a system they do later establish, their separate campaigns and wildly different gameplay styles lead to a ton of fun on repeat playthroughs. This is easily the second best entry in the X series, and if I had to apply a number to it, I'd say that Mega Man X4 gets a solid 8 out of 10 in my book. The only thing keeping it from being a perfect 10 out of 10 really feel like nitpicks when it comes down to it. The music is consistently fantastic all around, the gameplay feels quick and smooth, the visuals are bright and colorful though dark when they need to be. The boss designs are silly yet creative, and the attempt at storytelling is just so fantastic, though I gotta admit, when I was little, I would always skip these cutscenes because I just wanted to play Mega Man, so actually going through and reading it for the first time when writing this review was really eye-opening, and I'm really glad I did. It wasn't nearly as bad as I anticipated. The secondary characters, though not really too thrilling, still offer a bit of intriguing plot points, no matter how bad the terrible voice acting may have been. On my Twitter, I did a survey asking you guys who do you prefer to play as in Mega Man X4, and to my surprise, more of you guys actually said that you prefer playing as Mega Man X. But at the same time, it was kind of close, so it's really good to know that these two wildly different gameplay styles have successfully appealed to different crowds. And with that, we bring Mega Man X4 to a close. Now, if you didn't notice, I really love this game. But where do we go from here? What happens next? The ending was so vague. Like, where do we go from here? Well, be sure to tune in next time when we look at Mega Man X5 for PC CD-ROM. I'm just kidding, I'm gonna look at it on the X collection. Fuck you guys. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. I had a lot of fun making this one. If you liked the video, be sure to like the video. It really helps this channel grow. If you want to join this little family we've got going on, be sure to subscribe and never miss out on any future videos. But if you really want to get to know me, be sure to follow me on Twitter, because I'm usually talking about whatever projects I'm working on, or just whatever I'm currently up to. But yeah, thanks a lot guys, and I look forward to seeing you guys again next time. See ya!